By the way, if you're going to tweet about this, use hashtag Wizard World. And Wizard World is at Wizard World, and you are at Kody Chamberlain.
Yeah, Kody with a K.
Kody with a K. And I'm at Doc Housel. Oh, by the way, I'm Dr. Rebecca Housel. Hey, I'm the pop culture professor. I'm the pop culture professor. And this is David Marquez. David, what's your handle? I forget.
At David Marquez. Really confusing.
It's so easy. So easy, even I can do it.
I'm actually doing it right now.
Oh, we're tweeting right now. This is so exciting. I love it. Also, you can use hashtag pop culture professor. Why am I the pop culture professor? Because I trademarked it, but also because, that's a good thing. But also because I'm the first woman to have studied and written about comic books. That totally ages me. About comics and so that's what this panel is really about. That's what this panel is really all about, breaking into comics and how maybe some aspiring writers and artists, because we have writers and artists. Jay is a writer. He's at the end. He's invisible right now. He's using his superhero powers. He may show up again. We don't know. And Kody is a writer and an artist. In fact, I'm going to brag a little bit on this guy right here. This is my very favorite graphic novel of all time, Sweets, a New Orleans crime story, because it involves the best pralines on the planet from New Orleans. Yeah, and like some seriously messed up crime. It's so good. And of course, David Marquez, the reason why I asked him for his autograph, the one and only person of all that people I've worked with, Mark Vigera, Tyler Kirkin, Scott Liddell, Gail Simone, I think I can go on and on. Of course, you both know Nate. I know all these people, but I've never asked anybody for an autograph. His art is amazing. Oh my God, I'm not 7. Was that wrong?
No.
Nobody seemed to care. Oh, I'm with my people. I forgot. It's okay. Usually when I say that, everybody goes, "Oh, look at Jai. Jay is here. Jai, I said it right. Which way?
Jai.
The first way. Why did I mix myself up?
Oh, hell yeah.
You don't mind.
Because it's a suit.
It's a suit. That's true. Isn't that a great suit, everybody? Look at sense of style, man. I said that you were using your superhero powers and you were invisible, but
I'd say the suit is dapper.
that is a dapper suit.
Sweet man.
Isn't he sweet?
I'll get
Sweets for the sweet.
You come by. I'll give you some crap.
I'll give you some crap.
Hey.
Hey.
Never good.
Hey now. So this is a panel breaking into comics, and I'm actually going to let each of you say a little bit about yourselves, so that our audience can kind of latch on to that. But I've already been talking a little bit about you. But I met Jai for the first time in St. Louis, where he had another very dapper suit on. I think that one was blue. It's a good one.
I got a lot.
And like me, he's also a professor and teaches this kind of thing, which is really cool, and has done a lot of fantastic work. And so I'm going to let you go ahead, Jai, and talk a little bit about what you do and how you broke in.
Sure.
And then we'll go to David and then Kody.
Okay, I just want to really super fast biography stuff, because I hate it when these panels turn into a biography thing, because you guys don't care.
I love talking about myself.
Because if you guys don't care about what I've done,
No, we want to know how you started.
So right now I work primarily in Dark Horse Comics. I do a book called Dream Thief that's there. The first edition has come out. We're going to have a trade out in March and more next year. I'm doing another book there called Toshiro, which is a steampunk samurai story. It will just come out as an original graphic novel next year. I've also got a California story coming out next month. Another story with Dr. Page. Never mind all that. I've worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Dynamite, Disney, now primarily Dark Horse. I teach at the University of Kansas, where I teach comic books and film. I'm a filmmaker. I make movies. I've got films touring the country now on film festivals. None of that stuff matters. So we're going to get you guys in a second.
I'm currently a Marvel exclusive artist, working on Comic Spider-Man. I've also done some, I can't say what I'm working on next because that hasn't been solicited yet.
I can tell you.
It's all new X-Men, Secret Warriors, Fantastic Four. Before that, did some work at Top Cow and Archaea. My first book was called Syndrome, that came out from Archaea in 2010.
I remember that.
And thank you. Look at this guy. And I also have a creator-owned book called The Joiners in 3D, which comes out hopefully around New Year's.
love it. Thank you. And now Kody?
I'm Kody Chamberlain. I write and draw. I got started at IDW working with Steve Niles and a bunch of horror stuff, 30 Days a Night, and a few other things. Made the rounds through a lot of small press stuff. Ended up in Marvel, did some Shang-Chi, Deadpool, and the plan all along was to write and draw my own stuff, create my own work. So I finally got it, after many years of trying, finally got a pitch picked up by Image. It's called Sweets and Nuance Crime Story, which I wrote, penciled, ink, lettered, colored, logo design, book design, marketing, it works.
And the script is awesome.
Has to have.
And it's a really fun, create our effort, and lots of other stuff, MTV, storyboarding, and stuff like that.
Yeah, because you did MTV Punks.
Yeah, we did a book called Punks through MTV, really fun book. And
What's the worst human in the world, Josh Gallo?
Sure. Co-created with Josh Gallo, the lovely and talented Josh Gallo. And I also do quite a bit of concept art, storyboarding work.
Thank you so much, you three. Now, audience, even though I worked on comics for a long time, I don't actually have superhero powers. I can't read your mind, so if you have a question, raise your hand and let us know, so we'll stop talking when we see that happening. But otherwise, we're just going to keep going. Oh my gosh, there's already a hand.
I'll kick it off.
You, sir. Yes, sir. You,
Let's go,
sir.
guys. My name's Chris Garrett. I've been writing comics for 5 or 6 years now. I started off as okay, I want to write comics. Now what? I got on DeviantArt, I hired an artist, and I've just been self-publishing for 5 years.
Sure.
We actually just finished our first trade at table E33. E33.
E33.
So my question to y'all is, I do enjoy the self-publishing and everything, but our comic thing is overtime comics. So I guess my question kind of goes from that on how to move past the, we kind of do them, we pay the rent, the electricity, and then we pay artists, and kind of going from there to actually being a writer full-time and stuff. What would be your advice from self-creation to being paid to create?
I self-published comics from the time I got out of school. I went to film school to learn how to be a screenwriter, specifically just to write comic books. I never wanted to write screenplays, even though I wanted to write comic books. And I went to film school, I got out, and I just said, I'm going to go write comic books. And I didn't know what to do, and I just did it. And self-published a lot of stuff, and learned lessons every time I self-publish. I'm treated the same way. That issue 1 sucks compared to issue 2, and issue 3 blows away issue 2 and 1 combined. Issue 4, you're like, damn, I wish I'd known this stuff when I started writing the book, and on and on. That's just the learning, growing pains. If you started playing baseball tomorrow, by week 4, you'll be better than you were in week 1, done, right? But as far as self-publishing is concerned, you need to go through those growing pains until you get to a point where you feel like you're doing good work. Now, you know, and every artist knows, and every creative person knows that once you feel like you know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. There's always lessons to learn. But you still have to have this innate confidence in what you're doing, that you can say, I know that word balloon doesn't go there, because that steps on the art. I made this poor bastard work until 2 in the morning, and then I covered it up with me saying a bunch of stuff that I wrote. It sounded good, that now I know I don't need because he drew it, and I don't even have to say it anymore. Those are lessons you're learning, right? They're lessons you're learning at a time. I worked at my day jobs for the first 12 years out of college, before I became a full-time writer. And the only way I became a full-time writer is I stumbled ass backwards into my benefactor, my patron saint editor, left DC Comics and went to Disney. When he got to Disney, he said, I can hire you on a bunch of books that pay real money, as opposed to comic money. So it went from me making peanuts, piecing together one story after another, to getting paid a ton of money at once. And that's how I left my day jobs and became a full-time writer. Now, that doesn't happen to most people, but it also doesn't take everybody 12 years to get there. I sometimes get there all the time. But the lesson to be learned here is there's no easy way, there's no secret, there's no skeleton key. It is, you're doing what I tell everybody to do, which is make the thing, pay for the thing, because that will make you love it more, and then get better at it the whole time. And the real key turns into showing people. Because it's not about, there's no gatekeepers. No one is telling you that you can't be a comic writer, that you can't be a comic writer. But there will eventually be someone that you want to pay you to do it. And you have to find that person, and you have to be good enough when you find them to break open their skull and make them. You create a problem for them. But they've got somebody better than you already. And you have to be like, no, I'm so good that the guy you have isn't this good.
So school is really important, is what you were saying.
Well, I mean, doing it's really important. Like doing it to it. Once
Yeah,
you do
school helps you there.
it, once you do it, you learn when you learn when you screw it up.
In school.
Do it, and once you do it, after you've done it, show it to people, and show it to people like us, and say,
But not now.
we know that now. When you show it to us, you say, I am okay getting punched in the face, punch me in the face. And then,
Don't punch them in the face.
you guys know Dave Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Dave has the real review or the fun review. The fun review is you're doing all this stuff right. Look at this, look at you, you're doing great. They're not boosting your ego. And then you walk up and you're like, can I have the real review, Gary? Here's where you suck, and I'll show you. And then learn from something, like when you pay money to do this thing, learn from us. Don't step in the same puddle we did.
David, would you agree with what Jai is saying?
I mean, in general, absolutely. I think it's a really good breakdown of things to consider as you're breaking in, to supplement that to some degree. And this is true for what I'm about to say for writers and artists both. I mean, I've heard this little ditty that I like a lot. It takes 3 things to break into comics: talent, luck, and persistence. But you only really need 2 of them. So that explains a lot of why maybe you'll see certain creators who may not appreciate this like the work, how they get the job. Chances are they work their ass off trying to meet people and get their stuff in front of people, and they got lucky at some point along the way. Or some other mix of the 3, whatever permutation you want to choose. There's that. That said, I don't really believe in talent as like a given. I believe in skill as a developed result of endless deliberate practice. So Malcolm Gladwell talks about in Outliers about the idea of the 10,000 hour rule, which I am wholeheartedly a proponent of. The deliberate practice that Jai was talking about. I think that's where doing is where you learn how to do something. No one can tell you how to write a good script, or tell you how to draw a good panel, tell you how to compose, or tell you how to do whatever else. It's a matter of spending hour upon hour upon hour slaving away at a desk, doing whatever your craft happens to be, but then not just drawing aimlessly or without an end goal in mind. Is then looking at what you've done and giving an honest critique of what did you do right, what did you do wrong, how can you improve that, and applying that to the next page, work on whether it's writing or drawing or whatever else. And being open to professional advice from other professionals, from other peers. I think that collaborating with peers or networking with peers on your same level is incredibly important, because you can talk to a published writer and learn a lot from them, but also you will learn from people who are at the same level as you are. And bear in mind that people, I networked a whole lot with people who were trying to break in when I was trying to break in. And now we're all like a generation of creators in the industry. We're all friends, we help each other out. We hear about a game, we talk to our editors about it, that kind of thing. So you never know how that can help along with like the whole, luck side of things.
Right.
So yeah, I say deliberate, focused practice, and then constantly collaborating and meeting with your peers, whether they're already working or not, or trying to get work.
And that's true for writing and creating. Like Kody does both sides, and that's like a double whammy. So what do you think?
He can just be like, I don't need to know this. I'm good at it.
Oh, the genius among us. So what do you say, genius?
My opinion on that is, first of all, you're doing the right first step when you're making comics. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give when people walk up, they want to be a comic creator and they show me samples. Why are you showing samples? Show comics. Because until you can prove that you can make a comic, no one's going to hire you to make a comic. Drawing a good page isn't the same thing as making a good comic. So really, it's the only distinguishing line between an aspiring creator and a creator is someone who's actually made a comic. That's it. It doesn't mean you have to be published through a major publisher. You have to have distribution. You just have to finish a comic. If you run a marathon, you're a marathon runner. That's what it is. And believe it or not, that one little thing of actually completing a comic and handing it to someone is so much more powerful than showing a sample set of pages. It really, really is incredibly powerful. But really, there's only 2 things you need to break into comics. First, you have to make a good comic. And the second is you have to show it to the right people. That's it. That's the 2 steps. If you're still not getting it, not getting work, one of those 2 things is not right. You're showing it to the wrong people, or your comic isn't as good as you think it is. And for my case, I wanted to get into crime and horror comics. I didn't show portfolios to Marvel and DC. I showed them to IDW and publishers like that because they were the ones doing the type of work I wanted to do. So that's an example of trying to show your work, your comics to the right people.
That's a tough lesson too, to say that I'm not good enough. Like that's a long looking mirror.
Yeah.
But
I actually submitted one of my books to Image and got a bunch of feedback, and they asked me to send it back in a year or so.
well, yeah, One of my good friends, he describes it as we have a sickness. And we have a sickness that we derive our self-worth from what other people think of our work. And it's true that I don't feel good unless somebody likes my stuff, like, or they like whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And part of that's completing the circle. And completing the circle means giving it to someone else to punch you in the face. And they can tell you the worst, one of my favorite things ever, Phil Hester, that he had a guy pick up his book and go, it's called Fringe, and this is one of his first comics. He goes, guy picks up a book and goes, free! Your hobby, and walks off. And that's like that's the worst thing I've ever heard. It was just
layers there.
Exactly. There's so many layers of like you have wasted your life, and you're just like, are you kidding me? Like that's like the worst thing someone's ever said to anyone ever in my heart, because there's so many layers to it. But if you don't finish it, you're not open to getting better. You're not open to getting punched.
You have to grow a thick skin, or you will grow a thick skin and survive, or you will not, and you'll probably stop. That was my first portfolio review. I got my ass handed to me.
You get it.
I'm sorry, yeah. I'm going to talk from here now.
Who did your portfolio review?
It was a Marvel portfolio review in Chicago. I can't remember who the editor was. It was some guy who was clearly not. The editors do not really enjoy portfolio.
Yeah, they do not.
And so, making their job as easy as possible when you're running art or whatever to them. The easier to make their job, the less likely they're going to automatically hate you.
Yes.
Unless it was very hard work.
Yes.
So, for me anyway. So, growing a thick skin was really important.
What year was that?
2001 or 2.
And gentlemen, I'm going to interrupt your flow. Thank you for that great
Yeah,
question.
yes.
I got one right here, and then I know I've got one over here, and then I got one over there too. So go ahead, sir.
Top Cow has a kind of, what do you think about this? Do you think there should be more of those?
Can you say that, the name of that again? Top Cow.
Top Cow has a.
Top Cow.
Top Cow is a talent search
Top Cow.
for writers and artists.
I don't know any of the details, but I think that there's nothing wrong with. I think that there are good things, a good way of getting new talent. Bear in mind that they're going to hire people who fit the needs of the books they're trying to publish.
Yeah.
So, like Kody was saying, know your audience, know who you're pitching stuff to. And so, if you're an artist or a writer, bear in mind, look at what Top Cow does and see whether the work that you do is catered to that, or there's always the option of catering your work to that. If that means you're compromising what you want to do, there's a question of, well, then should you be applying?
What's the name of the new book that got drawn by a guy that doesn't use his arms?
Oh, I heard that.
Yeah, he draws with he uses vision recognition software, and he draws with his eyes. Like he draws everything digitally with eyeball movement.
Sounds like a
He's if he's quadriplegic, I don't know if he's, but he's So what's your excuse? You have a book and talk about this guy's drawing with his eyeballs. Yeah, I mean,
Let's take this back to everybody because you're kind of this guy is an illustrator and I'm a superhero fan. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I've done some research on the internet, and as far as it pertains to writing, are there certain script formats that publishers are looking for?
I mean, for me personally, I write in Word, and I just write up a Word document, and
Well, I guess as it pertains to my question, is like if you were to submit a screenplay to some
You need a
producer.
form.
Yeah.
No, form doesn't matter. I mean, you can just, I swear to God, I was going to write this down before I came, but there's a website that if you just search on Google comic book scripts, there's a guy that has a comic book script archive. He has about 20 or 30 different writers, like Matt Fraction, Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Rucka's got one. There's a bunch of guys that they have their scripts there, and you can learn, you can just look at their formats. And actually, Greg Rucka, I got a bunch of his scripts from him, and I did not like his format, but I like some of the stuff he did, like the way he describes like silent panels and other stuff that I nicked stuff from everybody and then found my own way to design it.
And every writer I've ever worked with, just to answer your question from my point of view, every writer I've ever worked with uses a different format.
Yeah.
Keith Giffen, Steve Downes, Jonathan Hickman, they all have a different format.
Yeah.
A little quick follow-up to that is I've seen formats where it says panel 1, yada-da, panel 2, yada-da, and then I've seen other scripts where it just says, this is the information, this is the dialogue, boom.
Depends on who you work with.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you find it insulting to the artist to tell them what has to go on what panel?
Yes and no.
Sometimes a writer is writing for a specific artist, and that's different than when they're just submitting a book to Marvel, DC, and the artist doesn't know. So a lot of times they'll go really heavy with the scripted stuff that the artist maybe insulting, like, you can't tell me what to draw, and just, that kind of thing, but a lot of times they just don't know who's drawing the book. So they try to over-clarify things, and that's probably a good idea. Because, it could be a brand new artist that's never drawn a book before that gets hired for that.
So I started writing a before it. I was given an artist who has never drawn a comic before, like it was his first gig, and I was like, my first script is super dense. And then I figured out he knows how to draw comics, and he has forgotten more than I know, so I just let him go. And by the last issue, we did 15 issues in a row. By the last issue, it was just like telegrams. It was like, and then you weren't punches in that. And then I know that Jeffrey was going to get it right. I didn't have to worry about it. And there's other guys that I've written for the same way. I did a script for Marvel, like Kody was saying, that I thought Dave Gibbons was going to draw it, so I wrote it like Dave Gibbons, and it went to a Japanese art studio that's never drawn an American comic before. So it was like, it didn't work at all, and it shows. And I'll show you that story sometime, and you'll be like, yeah, that doesn't work. And if David Gibbons had drawn it, it'd be awesome. But if I had known they were doing it, I would have written it differently. It just, it's always a different thing. Never.
I have a Tumblr page, Kody Chamberlain. .tumblr.com. I have some free scripts if you want to check out some of the stuff I do. But everyone does have a little bit of different.
Yeah. So there's not an industry standard.
No. I mean, it's typically panel description, dialogue. As long as you're in that general sequence, it should be okay.
Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it. And like you said, it's insulting. It can be if you get the wrong person. Like I did a thing with Doug Monk, who's an old friend of mine, and I did a script. And I showed it to a friend of mine. I go, I'm sending this to Doug, and he goes, you shouldn't do that. And I said, why not? Because you picked like the angle for these shots. And he goes, Doug knows so much more about this than you do. It's not.
I have to interrupt this wonderful interlude because we have a surprise guest. Ken Levin has joined us, just got off the plane. Woo! You guys are so good. Now we're in the middle of questions. So I'm sorry, Ken, because we were like, I'm going to give you my mic in a second, and we were heading over here. Answer the question already, okay. And then we were heading over here to the young man with the camera and the hat.
Hi. I wanted to ask, how do y'all feel about crowdfunding like Kickstarter, and what are y'all's experiences? Have y'all actually used that?
Oddly enough, my book Sweets, I was on a Kickstarter panel in early 2011, and the representative from Kickstarter said that my book was the first comic to hit the shelf of Kickstarter. I didn't actually know that, so I thought that was pretty cool. I love it. I think it's awesome.
Did you have any problems? I mean, was there any issue with...
My only problems were logistics. It's a lot of different packages, a lot of different shipping plans, and all over the world. And, we had spreadsheets. My wife was on board. I had 2 interns working it. My advice to people doing Kickstarter is simplify it as much as you can, because it could be a logistical nightmare.
I think crowdfunding is a wonderful genius, and it's a wonderful, awesome thing that I think Kickstarter is MySpace, and whatever is Facebook is going to steamroll it. So we will go, remember when we Kickstarted stuff before this other thing? Because people are now finding the holes in it, and once you start finding the holes and stuff, you either have to make it better, or it goes away. And that's the kind of thing that's happening now, is it's now past its nascency to where people are finding what's wrong.
Any other comments from our panelists on that?
Just to add one small thing to it. I haven't done any Kickstarter myself, but I have a lot of peers who have. And one thing I've heard consistently from a lot of them is that, and I was distracted for a second, I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything. There's a lot more work entailed in Kickstarter than just creating a project. And so you are marketing, you're publishing, you're doing everything for the book. And a lot of people, very big names in the industry who've done Kickstarters have been, we've been talking a lot recently about not realizing what they're getting into in terms of the sheer volume of work required to meet the requirements, meet your obligations to your contributors. So bear in mind that if you do choose to crowdsource, which is a great way of getting work done, you're not just going to be doing the work and making money. You will have to do a lot more. You have to deal with shipping, you have to deal with inventory, you have to deal with all kinds of stuff.
Ryan Brown did a book called God Hates Astronauts, which is one of the finest comics you can possibly buy. It is so amazing if you get a chance to go buy God Hates Astronauts. When it came out, he could not store all of the books that he sold in his studio unless they lined the wall, because they were too much of a load for the center of the floor. Think about that. That's not something that ever came up when he started his book, is that I'm going to have so much weight of books from my printer that I cannot store them in the center of the room. Like, you're not ready for all the stuff that happens.
So just be aware.
Yeah.
Ken, what's your experience with, have you any Kickstarter experience?
Some of my guys do, and I'm not really of any value in terms of telling you how to succeed in a Kickstarter. But the two things I've learned about it are, number one, whatever you promise, deliver more than what you promise. Jimmy Palmiotti has done 6 Kickstarters in a row. They're all successful. And if he says he's going to send you a book for $10 and you give him $10, he'll do a book and a print. And if he's sending you 2 books and 2 prints, he'll do that plus 2 more things, and he'll write a personal note. And Jimmy says, you know, his return is probably 60%. So you need, depending on what your goal is, you need to sort of think long-term. These are people who are being enormously complimentary to you. Because they're not getting jack shit, right? They're getting, you know, whatever you say, but in effect, they become an investor of yours without any equity. The other thing is, if you think long-term, there are publishers out there, if you haven't been published or even if you have been published, that, you know, there's all kinds of different publishing models, but one is Images Model, and First Comics, which is my company, does some of that. There's others where what they want is a finished book. You know, I want digital assets ready to print, and then if I'm going to print it. And that's what Kickstarter ends up giving you. You do say a small run, you do the manufacturing, you've got to do all the distribution to your people. And once you're done, you've now got digital assets that you can go over there to Stevenson and say, you know, I've got this book, got some really nice reviews, and their keyhole, which is, well, can you give us a finished book, digital assets, here you go. So that's really the sort of the moral basis of Kickstarter, which is literally to give people a way to get to the next level.
And the good part about Kickstarter is that, of course, you know you have an audience, as opposed to Image, which I wanted to Kody specifically to talk to, because Sweets is with Image. And that's not just, they do have to say yes to your project, but you also have to pay a little bit, don't you?
Well, in my case, I did everything in the books. I didn't have to pay, but most creators at Image do have to hire sometimes artists, colorists, letterers, things like that. So there's expenses involved. But on the publishing side, Image fronts the publishing cost, the print cost, even the solicitation of the catalogs, and they recoup that on the back end through their fee that they charge. But Image is also Kickstarter friendly, Indiegogo, and a lot of people are using it. I didn't have out-of-pocket costs to create the book, so my Kickstarter was really just for marketing, because Image does minimal marketing. We do press releases and catalog listings, and that's it. I wanted to run some banner ads, Facebook ads. I wanted to do some ads cans to reviewers. It's very expensive to do that stuff. And since I was drawing the book, I had very little free time to dedicate to that stuff without some revenue coming in to do it. So it was a huge help. And you know, one of the most important things I like to tell people about putting a Kickstarter project together is try to really avoid any concept of charity with it. Any package you create, make sure your dollar or your perceived value is in line with that. If someone comes to my table and spends $20 on merch, that's about the same quality and quantity of merch they get on my Kickstarter package. So there's really, on mine, there was no concept of donation or anything doing me a favor. People were buying and pre-ordering merchandise is really the setup I used. And that seemed to play pretty well versus some of the ones where you put in $50 and you get one signed comic and a t-shirt. You know, you get about $20 worth of merch for a $50 pledge.
Yeah.
So my thing is
One hour
trying to
stack.
balance.
One thing that Kody's talking about for Image, what they do for you when you step in the door, they are supposed to retain 100% of the rights, but what they do is they give you the front of the previous catalog, because they're one of the 5 publishers in the front, and they give you a full page ad when your book comes out, and then they do marketing and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that comes out there. I just saw a friend of mine this week in Kansas. Her name's Marjorie Liu, and she does, she's did Astonishing Answers and stuff like that at Marvel. We were talking about publishing stuff, and she actually said, I've never done all that stuff on my own. I've only basically worked at Marvel where they do everything. And I said something about, well, there's this retailer group and there's this thing, and she's like, that doesn't even enter into my head when I think about when I think about writing comics. And in a perfect world, it wouldn't enter into your head that you would write your comics and you had a company that had a marketing team and they had a foreign rights team and they had a Hollywood arm, and they were all going to take care of all that stuff for you. The reality is they don't. That most of the time they have someone that handles that stuff, and you have to prove that you're so good and so unimpeachable that you get those people's attention, that you get the guy who handles foreign rights at Image to call you and say, hey, I sold this in France, and I need you to look at this deal. Do you want it?
This concept ties in with Kickstarter a little bit. One of the big problems with Kickstarter is that people miss their delivery dates.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a huge problem, and it hurts everyone that's trying to do crowdfunding-like projects because of that. It hurts the reputation of the industry. So this is a concept that applies to Kickstarter, but also comics as a whole. Years ago, we talked about breaking in. I was in line at Dark Horse to show portfolios, and as we always did back then, the lines were 8 hours long. We showed each other our work, and the guy in front of me had amazing pages. These pages were brilliant. I couldn't imagine why this artist wasn't already working. I embarrassingly showed him my pages. They sucked, and they were pretty rough. And I asked how long this artist was taking to draw these pages. He was putting 3 months per page. Unbelievable. My pages weren't great, but I was doing about 2 pages a week with a full-time job in college. So I understood the concept of trying to increase my capacity to get professional work. And I think that's one of the reflections of Kickstarter. People don't have that capacity to deliver a book, even when they get funded. They're just not fast enough and not good enough. So, back on the subject of breaking in, it's not just your job to be good, to break in, to network, and become a professional, become trusted, but it's also, you have to increase your capacity to a professional level before you're hired to draw that first book, or you'll fail miserably. So, it's important for you as you try to break in to not just get good, but get fast, and really find that balance of quality and speed, because you're going to need it. And without exception, almost every time you talk to someone that's broken in, it usually comes from someone else blew an opportunity and a book is already late, and you have to then jump in and handle a rush project. So not only do you have to have professional capacity, you probably need to be a little bit faster than the people that had just gotten fired and quit the book. So there's something to think about that ties back in with both themes.
Does anybody know the book Rocketeer?
Yes.
Oh, yes, of course.
Maybe the most beautiful book I ever saw. He brought that in the first comments. We were just blown away. Would we publish it in a heartbeat? And the conversation's going really good. And I said, do you have any sense of how long it took you to do number 1? Or essentially, how long it would take us before we get issue number 2? And he said, about 11 months. And we just couldn't do it. So, on the other hand, essentially what Dave did was he said, okay, hunker down, and finished the whole story arc. And it took him about 5 years, and another publisher did it. So you kind of have to, everything Kody says is exactly right in terms of speed and so forth. But if, for instance, you're looking to do an independent creation, what's going to matter most on that, the advantage you have in that is speed isn't an issue, quality is an issue. You go out and do a kick-ass book that just rocks. I don't care if it took you 4 years.
That's right on.
That's what's going to make a difference for you in terms of a career.
And I think if and when you do a Kickstarter project, that's important to have in there. If you know what your pace is, you really just have to be honest and realistic about it. If you're slower, that's fine. You just can't lie to the people that are backing your project. If you say you're going to deliver in 6 months, you need to. 2 years later, you're going to have some really customers.
And those are the people that, of course, will be your future audience and continue to be your audience, so you don't want to do that. That's great advice from everybody in the panel. We have, I think, 3 more questions, one here, one there, and one again over here, and one. Oh, we still haven't gotten your question? I have to go to him first. Go ahead, sir.
This shouldn't take long to answer. For indie creators who are trying to break into the industry as professionals, other than doing Kickstarter, are cons the best place to go and pitch your projects at, to meet people face to face and break the skeleton, as you say, or is there anything else you can do to talk to people?
There's a couple of things. One thing, the first guy's question, he talked about publishing, he said he's already been on DeviantArt and stuff like that. Okay, it's a global community now. That Dustin Wynn, it was the guys that started off, but Dustin Wynn and I grew up in the same week at Wild Skull. So Dustin and I are the same age, our kids are the same age, we've done the exact same stuff. He's extremely successful and not, that's fine. But we're really good friends, and I was looking for an artist for a project, and I always know Dustin always has some apprentice that's really super talented, he's sitting waiting in the wings. Like, hey, Dustin, can you help me out? He goes, I don't have anybody right now, but here's what I'll do. I'll put an ad on my DeviantArt page. And I'm not going to let him talk to me. I'm going to put your email address and say, you can call Jai, and Jai has written for Marvel and DC, and you can just email him. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what kind of impact he has, what kind of footprint he has. I had 100 responses in 14 days, and it ended up being like 120 people emailed me saying, hey, you want to work on a book? I'd love to work on a book. Of those 120 people, 15 were ready to draw a comic book, okay? And then of those 15 people, 8 or 9 of them were already working. And the ones that weren't were the ones that I was like, okay, maybe we can start talking about this process. Well, long story very short, the guy who was the best of all the people who responded was a Polish artist named Janusz Pawlak. And he is one of the most brilliant people I've ever discovered. He's never drawn a professional comic at all, okay? How did I meet him? On the internet. I've never met him in real life at all. We've got our contract with Dark Horse, we've got our new book, it'll be out next year, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. The way I met him was a talent search for anybody, and I didn't know who I was going to get. And a guy in Poland to be the best guy. A girl in Tallahassee is better than is number 2 on that list. I'm like, where did you come from? What are you doing? She's like, oh, I do online comics, and I've printed about 400 pages of online comics. Where did you come from? Like the moon? Like that doesn't happen, So finding those people that way is the substitute for conventions now, is that you can find any number of people on the internet when you didn't used to be able to. Is this the best place to meet us and other people like you and have a beer and say, I'm interested in publishing, I want to talk more about people, with other people? Yes, this is the best place to have a real life human interaction. But we're in a world now where when I first started making comics, the guy who drew my comic lived in the same town as me, because we were the 2 guys at the comic shop who wanted to make comics.
I think comic conventions are probably the worst place to pitch.
To pitch, yes.
Network like crazy. Really, the thing you're trying to create at a convention when you're networking is you're trying to create a sense of trust and that they know you're not crazy and that you're a real person. So that's the most important thing. Because even though some editors are very generous, they'll look at your stuff, they'll consider it, they're very distracted. Looking for new talent is not their priority. They're trying to push their own books. So yes, you can pitch, and sometimes you can get lucky, and hear people getting lucky, but I think it's the worst place to pitch. What do you think?
It depends on what you pitch. You've got artist services, you've got writing services, you have independent creations.
If you have a finished issue of a book, and that's your only finished issue, you've got the other scripts written. Let's say you can draw fairly quickly, and I'm not referring to myself here, I'm just speaking in general.
Well, having a finished product is more important than anything, because a lot of people ask me, can you check out my script? Absolutely not. No way. Right. Not just because of, I don't want to read it because I don't, but because of legal reasons. I can't read your script because there's a lot wrong with that. Right. But if you said, here's my comic, would you read it? Absolutely, because I read comic books. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. So that's fine, that's fun. And then if you have something to say, if you have something cool, then I might be like, hey, the next day of the show, come back by my table because I might.
Here's what I would tell you, which is, we'll have a lot of people come up and meet me who are, artists, writers, people that have pitches, people that have finished books, and I'll do it any way they want. They want to read something, I don't want to insult anybody, But the truth of it is, they're much better off meeting me, and I'll remember them or not. But the best thing I'll say to them is, here's, if it's digital, here's an email address you can send it to. Because 2 weeks from now, it's going to get a lot more attention than it is here. I don't think we've lost any, but they certainly get lost in your brain. They don't get lost in the ether.
Right.
So if somebody sends me something and says, hey, I'm the guy that was talking about the Dallas Cowboys in Austin, and you said I should send you something, I want to give you a week to decompress, is what I was talking about, and they've got it, and then I can absorb it on my own time. If you're an artist, that's the only thing that'll get people's attention. If you, and that presumes that you're really, really good, but I've had that happen, where people have come up and said, I'm looking to do pencils and inks, and could I leave and here's some of my stuff, and every once in a while you get a double or triple take, what are you looking? You go, sure, and then you look again, and that really knocks me out, and then they'll get my attention. That's the only thing I think that have ever happened at a convention. What Kody said before about, the thing that will get my attention most is if somebody writes me and says, and I talked to Garth Dennis, and he said it'd be okay if I, send it to you, or Jimmy, or Damon, or whoever, somebody that, if you've got a friend who will support you, who's in the industry, and who thinks that you're ready, because you always run the risk that I'm going to pick up the phone and call Garth and say, really, you send this guy in? But if you've got that, yes, that always will get my attention.
Now, I hate to do this because I hate to do it. Yes, thanks for those great answers and for the great question. And I know we had a few others, but unfortunately, we only have enough time for our 4 panelists. And thank you, audience, for being so patient with us with having a 4th panelist come in, which is like such a huge treat. My God, I can't even say. I'm having trouble standing right now because I'm such a big fan, and I get to. I had with Neil Adams. I actually had with Neil Adams like last month. He just sort of popped into my panel, and I almost died. I was shaking. I held it together. This time I was ready. But before we end, I'd like each of our 4 panelists, and maybe beginning at this end this time, sorry, you'll get your play. Tell us where you are in Artist Center, and maybe what your future projects are that we can look for, something along those lines, just so that we can say goodbye to our panelists. Would you mind starting?
I don't know that much. First Comics has a couple of spaces. We've got some preview books. We're still tinkering with distribution. In the meantime, we got warehoused 14 completed books, and some of them are terrific. And I think I'm just real happy with what we're doing. I would be glad to answer any of your questions. I really apologize to my fellow panelists for disrupting this thing.
It's been an honor.
And, feel free. To me, that's what conventions are for, is the interaction. And this is, in the past, been a really good one for that, as opposed to things like San Diego, where you can't hear yourself talk and nothing happens. But, and I would guess it's true of everybody up here. I will tell you this, the thing that is always, that I've always admired about the comics industry, because in my career I've played in different industries, and the people in the comics industry are nicer, more creative, more collaborative, more willing to help somebody, want to see people succeed than any other industry that I'm aware of.
Better look.
And it's got the least amount of barriers to entry than any creative process you can think of. Go try and write a novel and get it published, or try and make a film, or try anything. But if you're talented, you'll get a book out, lickety split, because we're always looking and the fans are always looking. It's just a terrific industry. So anybody that's looking to break in, God knows. Keep going.
Thank you so much. Kody, what are your thoughts?
I've benefited a lot from people that have opened their sort of sketchbooks to me and their world to me and given me advice. Bill Simcoe was just kind of a mentor of mine. I'm palled up with him and swap pages. So I'm very open about what I do. I'm always happy to answer questions and show examples. I'm at booth BB3. I'm also doing the panel tomorrow. I just had to pull it up. I couldn't remember. 4 o'clock in room 14. It's really just about my creative process. I think it'll be a benefit to anyone looking to do
Idea iceberg?
Iceberg. It's about purely original work versus starting on a freelance property or something like that. So if you're creating something from zero, from the ground up, I think it'll be a big benefit. Again, that's tomorrow, room 14, 4 o'clock.
Ooh, thank you.
And on the table, BB3.
Yeah, I benefit also a whole lot from meeting creative professionals kind of coming up and trying to break in. So I'm at Artist Alley B25, so please come by, say hi, chat. And for the upcoming work, more Marvel stuff, and I have the Joiners in 3D coming out from Archaea at the end of the year.
And David Marquez that I found also Kody Chamberlain.
That's right. Kody Chamberlain everywhere.
Yeah, Dave Marquez.
Jai?
Somebody already had Jai Nitz on Twitter, so I had to give Jai Nitz 1. Can you believe that? I'm not kidding. That is weak. That's weak. The guy who's tweeted never has follow 6 people. I think. Anyway, I'm going to be here all weekend long. I'm doing 2 panels on Sunday. I looked up the supervillains in psychology on Sunday, and I'm also doing a battle for multicultural heroes on Sunday. Those are back to back. I'm at the table I'm next to Greg Capullo, so you don't have to find me. You're going to find a line of Greg Capullo, and I'm doing next to him. But as far as work coming out, I've got Dreaming coming out from Dark Horse. I've got a book called Toshiro coming out from Dark Horse. The next issue is Savage Story Pony. I've got a Pony story of that. And the new A+X story that comes out next month. That's a Dr. Strange B story that I've got. The last thing, Ken said this, there are the least number of gatekeepers possible between comics in your audience. The number of gatekeepers is actually 0, because Kody can walk home, or I can walk into the booth right now, sit down, draw any comic, take a picture of it with his phone, and it can be published on Twitter and Facebook before you guys are back on the floor. And then guess what? He's a comic creator. There's no one telling him yes, there's no one telling him no, he just did it. You don't ask for permission, you ask who's going to stop you. You don't say, can I do that? And hope that someone says yes, and you go, who's going to stop me? Nobody. And then you just go and do it yourself.
It's a good way to end our panel. Don't take no for an answer and go to school. Thank you so much.
Thank you.